There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain. Hey everybody, this is David Wilms welcoming you to another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. And I am joined this evening by the only, Mike McGrady.
That's right. I'm the only one on this podcast named Mike McGrady.
Yeah, if we Google your name.
There is an actor named Michael McGrady. I think he was in a couple Westerns and some TV shows.
So he's long since passed.
No. Like, he was in like Wyatt Earp or one of those that came out in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's stolen a lot of my, internet-based time.
Right. So if you,
because he's, successful.
Yeah. So if you search IMDb for Mike McGrady, not that one.
That's right. My SAG card is still in the mail.
Yeah. There's for me, it's there's a physician in San Diego that shares the same name.
Is there?
That is, he's published all over the place and very accomplished.
Yeah. When we were in law school, we'd get the free accounts to go do all the research you want, and you could look up profiles. So I looked up my name, did an ego search, using it just to figure out if there's anybody out there in the legal realm, and there was. And all I could find was a guy with my name in Washington who had just been disbarred. I was like, well, this is not good.
In Washington State or Washington, D.C.?
Washington State. Yeah.
Okay, because you were about to head, or you had just come from Washington.
I just come back,
come back from Washington.
So yeah, there's also an author. Anyways.
There is actually an actor, Dave Wilms, the actor. At least he's on IMDb. Don't think he's ever done anything.
IMDb.
Whatever it is,
yeah.
I don't know.
International Movie
What did I
Data
say?
Bank.
IBMD?
Yeah, I don't know.
Sounds like a technical college to me.
It sounds like how we say flipba.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah. We might get it right 1 out of 10 times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you know what we're talking about.
It was that first episode we did when I was trying to explain it, and Ronell just cocks his head and looks at me like, that doesn't match.
Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. Why did I agree to come on this podcast? Yet here we are.
Yep.
Yeah, well, more than a year later.
That's right.
60 plus episodes in. Grinding along without Nephi Cole.
Oh, that's
tonight.
right.
Because are we allowed to say why?
I am.
Please do.
You.
No, please do.
I'm self-appointing myself allowed to say.
Yeah, you got to say why.
He texted us right before we were about to, get together, and he said, "I can't come. My dog ate my phone."
So,
like,
what? Yeah, right? So Nephi just got a new puppy.
Mm-hmm.
And evidently
they were cuddled up napping, and the dog was chewing on his phone and ate up the screen and everything. So dog's fine.
Yeah, in fact, we
just
couldn't
to be clear. Dog is fine, but
he had to get a hold of him.
Yeah, that's right. He had to FaceTime us using an iPad, and we couldn't really hear him. So all right, let's just do this without him.
So
sorry, Nephi.
So he's not here, and he actually has the most excuse,
the oddest excuse,
the most 2019 excuse you could possibly. Like,
the dog ate my phone, and he really was like, "Dog ate my phone." .. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was pretty good. So he's going to miss this, but that's okay, because what we're going to do tonight, we're going to run through a bunch of stuff and give him an opportunity to, in a future episode to
cover
it. So here's what we're going to do. We went over this ahead of time. Normally we do these, we'll pick a topic and we'll do a deep dive on a particular topic. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do that tonight. We're going to do something a little different. Mm-hmm. We've had a number of guests in a row, and so we haven't really provided any updates on what's going on the national or regional, state level on issues around land, water, and wildlife. And it turns out there's a lot of stuff happening right now that's happened within the past few weeks, and we don't have the time to do a deep dive on all of it, and we couldn't pick which one to do. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to run through about 10 topics, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be like a 4-hour podcast. No. We're going to run through them real high level to hopefully pique your interest. And what we want you all to do, those of you listening, we want you to email us or hit us up on social media and let us know which of these topics, if any, you want us to take a deep dive into and give a more thorough analysis of.
And I would go so far as to say, if you have a better idea, let us know that too.
That's true. And we actually
on the list.
we actually do have a couple of good ideas in the queue that we have to do, and we're going to get to them, and we got to do some homework on them and find the right people to interview.
And we've had some really good suggestions from listeners thus far, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we really try and get to as many listener-suggested topics as possible because, frankly, if you don't want to hear it, then there's no point in us doing this podcast. Yeah. So we want it to be something you want to hear. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to run through these. So if one of these or more than one of these piques your interest and you're thinking, you know what, I want to hear an episode where you really dive into this and give us the full analysis of and backstory and what you expect to happen with all this, let us know. Send us an email. Our address, for those of you that don't know, yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. We love getting emails, and we try and respond to every single one. So we appreciate those of you that reach out through email. Also, find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all three of them the same handle, @itsyourmountain. So do that. After you listen to this episode, tell us what you want us to dive into of these topics. And while you're out there, while you're thinking of us, head on over to wherever you get this podcast. If you're getting it from iTunes, give us that 5-star rating. We really appreciate that. Leave us a comment on there, preferably a good one. Those, like we've said a bunch of times.
So put it this way. Give us a great comment, good stars, all that rating and everything so the public understands where to come. But if you have an idea or a beef, that's when you send it by email.
To Nephi's email.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, we do want to know.
If we're doing something wrong,
right? If there's something wrong, or you got an idea, or something to improve upon, that's great.
Or if you disagree with us, we're just providing a perspective and analysis. You may disagree, and we want to hear if you disagree too.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't claim to know it all. We just try and present information in a relatable way. So, without further ado, let's dive into this thing.
All right. Let's stop doing.
I'm going to start with what Nephi would claim is the most fascinating, groundbreaking, important topic of the day.
He would love to deluge us with information.
If he were here, we'd spend the next hour and a half talking about this. He'd spend the next hour and a half talking about this.
Yes. Yes.
So here's the quick and dirty rundown. Fill in the blanks for me where I missed stuff. But I'm not even going to talk about any of the history of the different U.S. Supreme Court cases on this. But we have the Clean Water Act, and we have implementation regulations tied to that Clean Water Act that help implement provisions of Clean Water Act.
Right.
In 2015, and this is after a lot of litigation. Like I said, we're not getting into the details here. If you want us to,
years after the passage of the Clean Water Act, too.
Yeah, passage of the Clean Water Act was in the early 70s. Right, and
finally got around to defining what was meant by the words waters of the United States.
What navigable water, as far as what waters of the U.S. are.
Yeah.
The Obama administration drafted a rule in 2015 defining that, and this week, meaning the second week of September, the Trump administration, actually on September 12th, the Trump administration repealed that 2015 Obama rule.
Right. Which you would have thought that would have happened faster, but they did it, and then they reinstated the prior regulations that were in what was there before 2015.
Yeah,
right.
before the Obama rule.
Right. But ultimately with the goal of putting forth their own.
Right. So step one was repealing the 2015 rule. Step two is creating a new definition for waters of the U.S.
Which they've been working on for several years now.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in response to U.S. Supreme Court case law telling them they need to do better defining waters of the U.S.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of that's the low down nitty gritty. There are two very, very strong positions about defining waters of the United States, and the Obama rule had an expansive definition that included, I'm going to get it wrong. I shouldn't even go into too much detail, but it included some wetlands and prairie potholes, and
ephemeral drainages,
and interconnected groundwater. I think.
Yeah. Basically, it was
very expansive.
If it ever might have water touch it,
then it's waters of the U.S. and subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act.
And it matters because of the jurisdictional implications.
Right. Explain that, just briefly.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I said briefly.
Yeah. Right. So essentially, it's kind of a determination between who's going to say what happens where.
Does the state or the federal government have the ability to regulate that?
have the ability to regulate something? Is it a national issue? Is it a local issue? And it's not just the water that gets regulated. It's everything that touches the water or goes near the water. Whether a spoonful of dirt can be turned over type situation.
It could be affecting an agriculture practice.
Yes.
It could be affecting you want to build a
mall.
Yeah, or
anything.
Or something even smaller. It might be, do you want to build a shed on your property?
Yeah.
Where that is might.
Yeah, so it's not just the
matter.
regulation of like streams and things. It's all the things that go on near it.
Right. So that's WOTUS in a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
So that right there, if we wanted to flesh it out and give you the history of it, how we got to the point of the 2015 rule and all the politics that went to the repeal and the two sides, those in favor of the Obama rule, those against it, those in favor of what Trump is doing, those against it. We wanted to get into that kind of detail. We're happy to do that. It's going to take a lot of time. Let us know.
Yeah.
And we'll do that.
Yeah.
So that's the first one.
Right.
Here's a big one. Number 2. Here's a big one. Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah.
A couple of things have happened there. For those of you that are unfamiliar, then you've been sleeping under a rock for the past 40 years because it's been a hot topic. It's ANWR is what people probably commonly are familiar with, that acronym, ANWR, right? Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska, on the north slope of Alaska.
Yeah. ANWR was big when I was years ago working on the Hill. It's been going on since pre 9/11, really.
When I say 40 years, I mean it's been an issue for decades.
Significant issue, yeah.
And the issue is around development of oil and gas resources, primarily oil resources.
Right. Top of the world stuff.
Top of the world stuff.
Not bottom. Not what those Australians would think.
Depends on where you're looking. Right? Yeah.
Right. Top of the world stuff. That's how we go.
If my brother-in-law is listening,
that's why I mentioned it. It's top of the world.
Who's Australian?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he lives on top of the world now.
That's right.
He lives in Norway.
Well, he literally does. Yeah. Right.
So here's what happened in ANWR. The big issue has been around opening that up for oil exploration and development.
Mm-hmm.
And last year or the year before, it was in the tax bill, I believe. Mm-hmm. There was a piece of that, a rider on that authorized. In fact, it wasn't even authorized.
December
I
2017.
think it mandated leasing in, or maybe just authorized leasing in ANWR for development. It was December 2017. So fast forward, in order to do that, because it is federal land, it had to go through NEPA process.
Right. National Environmental Policy Act. Right. And just to put a finer point on it, leasing doesn't mean development. It just means a process to sell off the right to think about developing assuming further NEPA occurs.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So, two things have happened with ANWR in the past week, and again, being second week of September.
Right.
One, the House passed a bill, the U.S. House passed a bill that would stop lease sales. It would prohibit lease sales in ANWR. Now, just so we're clear, it passed the House. It's very unlikely to pass the Senate. But it did pass the House. On the same day, coincidental or not, on the same day, Secretary of Interior published the final environmental impact statement for ANWR, meaning published the assessment of the potential environmental impacts and the proposed development and alternatives to the proposed development in the environmental impact statement. In that statement, the proposed alternative,
Preferred alternative.
sorry, yep, thanks. Preferred alternative was to open up the entire, not just open up, it was to lease the entire 1.5 million acre coastal plain in ANWR.
Right, which wouldn't necessarily mean a drill rig every 6 inches, right? With all of the technologies there is. It's just you have rights to develop all that.
Yeah, so the idea would be they'd lease it all up, and they being BLM would propose all that acreage,
Put it on the block.
put on the block,
sale block. Yeah.
Yep, and it would go to competitive bid in a lease, and if it sells, they could sell up to all of it. They could lease, they could lease up to all 1.5 million acres. Then at that point, any development would be limited by stipulations and different restrictions and regulations on where development can occur, time of year that development can occur, well spacing, type of wells, all that sort of stuff. All of those things are details we can dive into if this is something you want to know more about.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be ANWR on just how drilling comes about.
Yeah, if you want to know the
series of
leasing
things,
process and how you go from proposing a lease to developing,
plan of development, application for permit to drill, all those things that go from this is a good idea to now they're shipping oil out, right?
Yeah. ANWR is a good example, just because it's something that a lot of people know about, but we can provide examples from other places too.
Yeah. So just to be clear on this one, they have the BLM issued, through the Secretary of the Interior, their decision on the environmental impact statement, which was the NEPA analysis. All it was an assessment of the pros and cons of things from an environmental perspective. It is not a final decision. There's a preferred alternative. There's a variety of alternatives. And we anticipate at some point in the near future, within probably 30 days or so, a record of decision will come out, which will be the final sort of, okay, now we've picked which alternative we're going to use, being informed by the NEPA process.
And to be clear, though, in something like this, it's quite likely that the preferred alternative will become the identified alternative in the record of decision.
Right. Yeah. It's the reason it's preferred.
Right.
And then the record of decision will come out, and then there'll be notice, and then the lawsuits will be filed.
Right. And so theoretically, from a timeline standpoint, by the time mid or late October rolls around, BLM could be entertaining requests for leases and potentially starting the process for having a request for acreage to be leased, and could be starting the process for having a lease sale. But
absolutely, oh, yeah, right. So they could, if the record of decision came out in the next 30 days, at that point, it makes it possible for them to entertain the idea. And in the process of entertaining the idea, it's generally going to take 6 months before you even have something on the sale block, because they have a whole nother NEPA process to go through.
But chances are, in this instance, it'll be fast-tracked. and we can talk about why if that's something you want to hear about.
Sure,
It shouldn't take the full 6 months. It'll move much faster, but it might also get enjoined.
Sure.
Through a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right. So we fully anticipate that there will be litigation over it, over the EIS itself.
We could, frankly, we could even talk about how it is that the House could even have wind that BLM would get something done so that they could get a bill out and passed in the House of Representatives on the same day.
Well, that was flipping it from the direction
Yeah, no, I'm just sort of backtracking, and now we can move forward.
Yeah. No, but you're flipping. What I'm saying is you're flipping that from the other side. Is, I mean, everybody's known that this EIS was coming soon.
Yeah.
So the flip side of it is, did Interior try and steal some of the Democrats' thunder by pushing the CIS out and on the same day?
Well, we could talk about that.
So we can talk about which one, who was driving the narrative that day.
How does the executive and the legislative branch kind of keep an eye on each other and know what they're doing?
Yeah, and who's intending to do what that day, and who really was controlling the narrative, if anybody.
Yeah.
That would be kind of fun.
Yeah, so we could cover that.
So we could, yeah. So next thing, this will be short.
Mm-hmm.
So again, same week we're talking about here. This week ending on September 13th, which is actually the day we're recording. Friday the 13th, full moon. Friday the 13th,
That's
we're
right.
recording.
Yeah.
But earlier this week, Senate committee, I think it was EPW, Environment and Public Works, but I didn't confirm that it was that and not Natural Resources. Probably Environment and Public Works, held a confirmation hearing for Aurelia Skipwith. The administration nominated her last October of 2018, to be the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And she never had a hearing, so she never went through the confirmation process. And because we came into new Congress then after the first of the year, the administration had to renominate her for that position of director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So they did. Earlier this summer, she was renominated for director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Senate held a confirmation hearing for her earlier this week.
It was in front of the Environment and Public Works Committee.
Okay, that's what I thought it probably was. No timeline for when a formal Senate confirmation vote might occur, but she has had the required confirmation hearing before the committee.
Right, which is usually a good indication, and then there has to be consideration by the entire Senate, not just this committee.
Correct. And so the question now that we're into mid-September, will there be time to get it on the calendar for the entire Senate to vote on that? Typically, that should be plenty of time. We'll see what happens there. Interesting thing about this, there has not been a permanent director, a confirmed director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service during the Trump administration. The last Senate confirmed director was Dan Ash, who left on the first day of the Trump administration, taking office. So we've gone now more than 2.5 years without a director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, but we also are a confirmed Senate confirmed director. We also still don't have a Senate confirmed director of the BLM, and a host of other positions. So as far as what a deep dive might look like on something like this, we could talk about that. What positions haven't been confirmed yet, or haven't even been nominated yet?
How does it work? How does the confirmation process work? How is it possible to have interim directors and no permanent directors? We could even talk about Aurelia.
We sure could. Yeah. Some of her background and qualifications for the job. A lot of people don't know there's a statutory requirement for certain professional experience to be able to have this particular job, to be nominated or at least confirmed for this particular job.
She's not unfamiliar to this podcast, so we could cover her.
Right. So there's a lot we could talk about around that subject. If that's something you want to hear more about, let us know. Mm-hmm. Here's another one. This one's kind of fun. So the infrastructure in the United States is a constant source of consternation from Republicans and Democrats alike. This seems to be one thing that Republicans and Democrats agree on is we have crumbling infrastructure. What they don't agree on is how to address that crumbling infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah. When you started that sentence, I was thinking, well, but yeah, no, you're right.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Oh, that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
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 We all know it's bad, but we don't know.
But
we can't agree on what to do about it.
Agree on what to do about it.
Yeah.
Well, so running through the same committee in the Senate that is handling the Skipwith nomination is also considering a transportation infrastructure bill. A transportation bill, which
Right.
is basically an infrastructure bill for transportation in the country, right?
So that's the Environment and Public Works Committee run by Chairman Senator Barrasso.
Correct. Who I believe is from Wyoming, senator from Wyoming, third ranking Republican senator. Doesn't matter.
That sounds right.
It does matter, but
it does.
It actually matters a lot, and we can talk about that. Why that matters. Anyway, here's the cool thing about this bill. If you are a hunter and angler or just generally interested in wildlife
Or just driving.
or want to survive. Yeah. There are so many studies from around the country that state departments of transportation have done, that state fish and game or game and fish agencies have done, that federal transportation departments have done, that non-governmental organizations have done about vehicle and wildlife collisions and where those occur and effective ways to mitigate those. And one of the most effective ways to deal with wildlife vehicle collisions to protect public health and safety and to protect wildlife populations is through the construction of underpasses or overpasses to allow for safe passage and movement of wildlife across these densely traveled highways and interstates and so forth.
Yeah.
Where they've been put in, there's a new one in Colorado. We have them in Wyoming. There's some famous ones in Banff National Park in Canada. There's several more around the West. They reduce vehicle collisions by, in some cases, up to 90%. A lot of them in the 80% range. That's significant cost savings. Right. In this infrastructure bill, there was an addition of $250 million, $250 million added to this for wildlife crossings around the country. That's a big deal,
right?
That's a really big deal in an infrastructure bill. So if when you're thinking about wildlife, and there are a lot of states doing some cool things, some innovative things around corridor or around crossings and overpasses, underpasses, wildlife crossings.
Right.
We can talk about some of the stuff states are doing, but we can also talk more about this infrastructure package and how that would work and how funds would be allocated and how it would work, how you develop crossings and how they'd work with states on that. And the way states have set up prioritization of crossings. And so that could be a pretty fun podcast to do.
Yeah.
But that's a kind of a good news story coming out
right.
that has really strong bipartisan support.
Right. And with bipartisan support, it's likely to not get removed from the bill.
Yeah, I don't see it getting removed on the Senate side, and then the House side. The only question is, do they ask for more money?
Yeah.
And then do you create an issue on the Senate side?
Right.
So it's a good play. They're in a good place right now. Anyway, I think there's a chance to really get some good funding there for wildlife crossings.
Good news. That's good.
Good news.
All right.
Right?
Next.
So now that we've gotten the good news out of the way, we're just about to beat down the hunting community here. All right. So here we go. This is some state-specific stuff. We'll end with some good news because the next few of these are going to be pretty rough, especially if you're a hunter or an angler. So California. If we had listeners from California, I'd love to hear from you and what you think about what we're about to dive into here. Two things out of California. First, California has now become the first state in the country, I believe, I need to confirm that, but I think I'm correct on this, to ban trapping. blanket prohibition on trapping for any purpose on public or private lands. So it's called the Wildlife Protection Act of 2019. It was just signed by the governor of California. Goes into effect in something like 30 days. I can't remember when it goes into effect, but it's been signed. It's a done deal.
Right.
California is going to ban all trapping. And a lot of you out there, there might be a lot of you out there that you don't trap. Most hunters don't trap.
Right.
And maybe you don't think this is a big deal. It doesn't really affect me. I don't even trap anyway. And the trapping population is pretty small. And the number of animals trapped, proportionately to the population, maybe that's pretty small. I don't know. This is all stuff we'll dive into if you want us to do this.
Well, and it's not something that is isolated, that will ultimately be isolated to California. That's a state that has a long history of setting, regulations or laws like this, and then creating laws on top of that to regulate everyone around them to conform to their ideas through economic means, because they have such an economic powerhouse. So they kind of drive the boat on a lot of things that we see related to, miles per gallon in your vehicle. It's because of stuff they do, or air quality issues, or issues just around life cycle of carbon and climate change and things that they're trying to dictate through their own economic power how things were going to happen in states around them. So
they want to drive the national narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not just that, okay, there's no trapping in California. There could be significant impacts outside of the state because of their ability to control things outside of their state.
Sure.
So
they've shown it with mountain lions.
Right.
So they've already, a number of years ago, banned hunting mountain lions, but they also banned I think it was the importation of mountain lion parts from other states into California. So they made it so you effectively were discouraged from going anyplace else to hunt mountain lions too, because you couldn't bring anything back.
Right.
Yeah. So they have and I don't know I know that law was challenged. This is all stuff that we'd have to dive into, do some more independent research and dive into for a full podcast on it if this is something you're interested in. But California is starting to develop a scary track record. I know we try and be as unbiased as possible on this podcast and just present information. But coming at this from a hunting perspective, some of the stuff going on in California is making me nervous.
Sure.
And that leads me into the second piece of California. And it's that California is set to ban bobcat hunting.
But only for 5 years.
Right. That's technically correct. Practically, probably incorrect. Technically correct. But so I already said they banned mountain lion hunting. And now they're talking about, now they're banning, I think the bill is passed and it's just awaiting the governor's signature. They've banned bobcat hunting as well. And you're right, that bill sunsets in 5 years. So it's a 5-year moratorium on hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But before bobcat hunting could begin again in 5 years, or at some point thereafter, the State Game and Fish Commission in California would have to develop a new management plan for bobcats. And the agency's estimated cost of developing that plan,
in today's dollars, yeah.
Today's dollars,
yeah.
$2.5 million.
Yeah.
And so when you think about an agency budget in a wildlife agency and we've talked about this podcast a lot, how so much of that money is coming from, vast majority of that money is coming from license sales,
Mm-hmm.
Pittman-Robertson money from the selling of hunting equipment, firearms, ammunition, excise tax distribution from those. That money is funding the wildlife agency, and $2.5 million having to go to developing a management plan for bobcats at a time when bobcat numbers are not just stable but increasing around that state. That's known. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now develop that management. That's taking money away from managing other species as well. So for the few people that hunt bobcats currently, is it going to be worth the investment of $2.5 million to develop that at the expense of other wildlife? And there's a chance it might not be. So in some ways, this could become a more permanent ban on bobcat hunting in California. And I'm sure there are some people that say, you know what, we shouldn't be hunting predators anyway. We shouldn't be hunting bobcats or mountain lions anyway. And that's a discussion that we can have on a future podcast about this. But you and I have talked, and I know you've got some thoughts, and I think we share similar thoughts on this, that when you start chipping away at pieces of the hunting portfolio, really what you're doing is chipping away at hunting. And I'm going to mix metaphors, but you peel that first layer of the onion off for mountain lion hunting. Then you peel that next layer off, banning trapping. Then you peel another layer off, banning bobcat hunting. They peeled the layer off years ago. Said you can't. I kill an elk. I want to sell you at some point down the road, maybe in an estate sale. Somebody passes away and you want to sell their antlers. Can't do that in California. Can't sell those antlers in California. Just sort of peeling away piece after piece after piece. Type of ammunition you can use hunting. There are groups out there that are making very concerted efforts, very strategic efforts to peel away those pieces of the onion until there's no onion left.
That's absolutely right.
And so that's what concerns me about laws like this.
Yeah, and you see it with the perception that it happens most often in these days, in those species or those types of sporting activities perceived to not have a tremendous amount of people. So I don't know anybody that traps, but
I do.
It's not the same number of people as hunt,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So it's a dwindling type, or perceived to be a dwindling type of activity, and so it's easier perception-wise to remove those rights.
It's also easy because not a lot of people know how it really works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
To paint a picture. Yeah, to paint a picture around ethics, and whether it's ethical to trap.
Right.
With knowing that the vast majority of people don't know how these traps are set or actually work.
Yeah.
Or how often they're checked, or things like that.
Sure, and likewise with other species, mountain lions, bobcats, predators, as you mentioned, that if there's not a perceived strong support behind it, if it doesn't fit the narrative associated with traditional hunting, it's easier to have the public accept removing those rights.
Right.
And as the hunting population diminishes over time, it's just easier and easier.
And to tie that exact point, to make another point on top of that, once that is gone, because our population, the number of hunters, as you mentioned, is continuing to decline. When things like that go away, getting them back, to say it's hard or virtually impossible, I don't know if you can state it strongly enough how difficult it would be to get that back.
To reestablish a norm?
Reestablish it as a norm once it's gone.
Sure.
Look at dove hunting in Michigan. There isn't any. How do you get that back?
Right.
Dove hunting was banned in Michigan. How do you get that back? There are hundreds of millions of doves, but you can't hunt doves in Michigan. There's some... I don't want to dive into Michigan politics right here, but the point is it's hard to get it back.
Yeah, it's any right once taken away is almost impossible to get back.
Yeah, and I know there are going to be some people out there maybe saying the word right is the wrong way to say it. In a lot of states, hunting, fishing, trapping is a right.
Yeah, well, this is a podcast
but
about hunting
but
and
we're
fishing.
calling it, yes, we're calling it a right.
Yeah.
I was born with this.
Sure.
I view it as a right. But even if it's not a right, it's still, it's a lifestyle, it's a heritage, it's a, you name the descriptor. It's all of those things to millions of people. And again, you start peeling that away, and once it's gone, it's gone. And
Right.
so it's a slippery slope. And along the lines of that slippery slope, another one I'd mention is the state of New Mexico.
Right.
So here's an interesting thing. State of New Mexico, for those of you who don't know, and why would you if you don't live in New Mexico?
Yeah.
And maybe we've talked about this before, maybe we haven't, I don't know. But when the new governor was elected in New Mexico and sworn in January, one of the first things she did was dismiss the entire commission.
The Game and Fish
The
Commission.
Game and Fish Commission in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And the department there went without a commission for several months until the governor appointed a new commission. Now, we can talk about this in a future podcast if you want, and the intent of commissions or departments to be non-political entities focused on the science, and the commissions to be citizen-based and as removed from politics as possible. But it's a tough sell for me to say that there are no politics involved when a governor comes in and removes an entire commission and replaces the entire commission with people of their choosing, all in one sitting. That's what happened. And I think we talked about this before, but in the last New Mexico legislative session, there was a bill circulating that would have banned trapping of coyotes on public lands. I think is what it was. So there were, or maybe it might have been all trapping on public lands. I can't remember the specifics, but it was a trapping prohibition bill in New Mexico. It failed, but fast forward, and now there's a regulation proposal before the new Game and Fish Commission in New Mexico, and they're considering a trapping ban on mountain lions, cougars, pumas, panthers, whatever you want to call them, prohibiting the trapping of mountain lions in New Mexico. And there are other pieces that they're considering in there as well, as far as buffers around trails or roads or campgrounds and other
Right.
places for where trapping can occur. That they're taking public comment on. There's going to be a public hearing on next week, the week of the 16th of September.
The week this podcast comes out.
The week this podcast comes out.
Yep.
But it's just another example of another state that taking a run at some traditional hunting practices. Just something worth pointing out. We can have a real deep dive if listeners want around some of these things going on around the country and what do they mean for the future of hunting, and what can you do as hunters and anglers to push back on some of this if you want to. So there's that one, and I have two others, two really short ones.
Okay.
First one, e-bikes. Do you have an e-bike?
I do not. I looked into that because we were looking at going archery hunting one year, and I thought, it'd be really good to take the little chariot you pull the kids behind your bike, and an e-bike with the motor on a mountain bike, and then heading out with the archery equipment on it.
When we were elk hunting last year,
Yeah.
I wanted that so badly. There was
You
remember last year, so without saying exactly where, I don't want to give away where we were, but you remember during archery season, you and I were out and we'd gotten back in what you thought was a mile and a half or so. We just wandered all day chasing bulls, right? We were on elk all day long. And the sun was going down, and that bull had to be, we never ever saw him, but he bugled back at us a dozen or more times.
He followed us
down the mountain.
Yeah.
We drew him down. We had him, he couldn't have been 70 yards from us. Because we were in the open. He had to be behind this rock and little clump of trees. And instead of trying to close the deal, I looked at you like, we should probably go. Because
the moon is up.
Because the moon's up. It's almost dark. And And I think we were like 5 or 6 miles from our truck.
Oh yeah, at least.
And you're like, no, we can't be that far.
Well, yeah, because we hopped a couple drainages and came out the bottom, and we weren't where I thought we were.
And
On my little map, we were not where I thought we were.
But it was on that walk out, and we actually got into this drainage on an old logging road.
Yeah.
That it was a great old logging road to hike all the way out.
Oh, yeah.
Down this
Yeah.
drainage, and I got thinking, man, having an e-bike
Yeah,
here,
absolutely.
man, we'd close some distance. That would
Or
be
horses
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to take care of horses.
I don't want to take care of horses either, but that was an area that I think I pretty much said I'll never come back here unless I'm on a horse or an e-bike.
Yeah, we were far. A lot of elk, but we were far. Why do I say this? And it's because recently the Secretary of Interior just signed an executive order to open up more areas of lands controlled by or managed by Interior, which would be BLM and Park Service, wildlife refuges. Might be missing something. Bureau of Reclamation lands potentially, but to open those places up for e-bike use in places where
And the E stands for electric bike.
right.
Like a battery pack that runs a motor that you can go pretty fast on those things.
Yeah, some of them are biking assists.
Uh-huh.
And some of them are just flat out propelling you.
Right, the Tesla of mopeds.
Yes. Yeah. So it would open up places that are currently open to mechanized use with bicycles
Right.
to now also include e-bikes that can travel up to but not exceeding 20 miles per hour. So there's a cap on it. I'm not going to go into more detail about that, but we can talk about the ramifications of that if people are interested. Talk about where that might apply, what some of the controversy around it is. The National Park Association has come out very strongly against it. So, if folks want to know why there's opposition to it, let us know. We can dive into that one.
Yep.
So here's the last one. The last one's a fun one. We're in September.
Yep.
Lots of good stuff happening in September, as in hunting season has started.
Well, yeah, for a lot of places, hunting is just really getting
Just
going.
rip roaring.
Yeah.
People out there archery hunting, some muzzleloader seasons open in certain places, some rifle seasons open for certain species, some bird season, upland bird, migratory bird. We're getting close in some places to waterfowl, early waterfowl season starting. I mean, it's just, it's like my spiritual. It's like my favorite time of year. This is like I don't know how we're going to get podcasts out over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Because
Reruns.
we might have to do greatest of best hits.
Yeah,
right. Because I plan on being in the field a lot, and in this month in particular has some more special meaning than others, because on the the fourth Saturday in September?
Yeah, fourth Saturday in September
is National Public Lands Day.
That's right. It is. It's been around, I don't know, longer than I've been out of high school.
Started in
94.
I don't know. So I've got this. Maybe it did somewhere. National Public Lands Day, according to the BLM, said they started doing some stuff in 1979.
Oh yeah. But I think it was established in 94 and held annually.
Okay.
As the fourth September and
okay. So finalize the specific.
Saturday.
Okay.
Yep, for National Public Lands Day.
So let me ask you. I know what I'm doing. Like where are you going to be, Mike McGrady, on National Public Lands Day?
I think
September 28th, 2019.
I think if you ask my wife, I'm going to a wedding. It's not an outdoor wedding. Which is why I'm going antelope hunting the weekend before that, taking the kids.
I will be antelope hunting.
Yeah,
pronghorn
that's
hunting,
right.
speed goat hunting, prairie rat hunting, whatever you want to call them. Around here, some of us call them prairie rats.
I'm gonna go the weekend before and give you the intel on where they are. But I don't know where I'm gonna be.
I know where you're going to be.
Yeah, where's that?
You are going to be diligently and diplomatically, and I don't know what other words you want to use. You're going to be supporting your wife. You're going to be there by her side
Yes.
when she needs you there, because nobody wants to attend a wedding alone, so that you can go hunting later in the season.
That's right. The next weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Deer.
With me.
That's right.
Yeah. And
All
then,
right.
and we have to do it that weekend, because the weekend after that, I have to go with my wife to a wedding.
What is it with these people that are setting weddings during hunting season?
I think I'm not all for government regulation, but there's one place that I wouldn't mind seeing the government weigh in, and that is banning certain activities like weddings and other things.
We need to recruit more hunters on both sides of the aisle.
Beautifully spoken. Beautifully spoken.
Right.
But so we're going to be out hunting, for the next several weeks. I think over some future podcasts, we'll probably share some of our exploits. Hopefully some of our spoils.
Right. Yeah.
if all goes well. And we hope that you all, like we said at the beginning of this, we hope you all will reach out to us, send us some email and say, hey, those topics you covered, even though that podcast was pretty boring because you didn't get into great detail in anything, I would love to hear more about, and you name that topic.
Yeah, right.
If one of these strikes your fancy, let us know. Your Mountain at itsyourmountain.com or our social media pages at It's Your Mountain. Let us know what you want us to do a deep dive into. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to getting out into the field ourselves. We look forward to hearing some of your stories. If you got some stories you want to share about your hunting exploits, share them with us. Anything else you want to add, Mike?
No, I think that that's a lot of topics. As you can see, we normally try to focus on one thing, but we do, at any given time, we're going through about 10 things like this. And this was just sort of an opportunity where, rather than having us pick it, we want the listeners to tell us what's the right one to go with.
Yeah, I guess in some ways this is sort of a peek behind the
It is
curtains,
kind of a
right?
peek behind it, yeah.
This is what we do. We compile a list and say, okay, what do we want to do a deep dive into this week,
Yeah.
and spend a bunch of time researching or find a guest to come in and talk about. And
Yeah.
there's just so much going on this time. We just said, let's just do a brain dump on what's going on, and let the listeners decide what they want to hear more of.
Yeah.
So you decide for us. If we don't hear from any of you,
That we know.
then it is decided.
Yeah.
And you won't hear from us ever again, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we look forward to hearing from you. And we hope you have a great time getting into the field this month. We know we will. And always remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.